A virtual network, or VNet, is a private network for your VMs in Azure. All VMs deployed to Azure must be deployed to a VNet. A VNet has an IP address space, so all VMs on the VNet share that IP address space. It has one or more subnets. This is just a way for you to subdivide the address space of your VNet for ease in deploying your VMs for various workloads or for security purposes. A VNet is scoped to a region. So a VNet cannot span two regions. If you have VMs deployed to multiple regions in Azure, you will have to have a VNet in each region where you have VMs deployed. It's recommended that you create a diagram to design your network before you start implementing. Create your VNets, create your subnets, and then when you deploy VMs, you can just make the choices. In this picture, you can see there's an Azure virtual network that has 3 subnets on it: production subnet, gateway, and Azure Bastion subnets. The production subnets we're using for VMs that are deployed. The gateway subnet is a special use subnet we'll look at more later in this lesson for connecting a VNet to other networks. And the Azure Bastion subnet is another special purpose subnet that's used for making private connections to VMs on a VM from outside of Azure. When you're designing your VNets, avoid any overlapping IP address spaces. This should be for all VNets you deploy in Azure, but also for any on-prem networks. This will just save you pain if you decide later to set up connectivity between your VNet and your on-prem network, then you don't have overlapping IPs to be concerned with. So let's look at how easy it is to set up a VNet in Azure. All VMs in Azure must be deployed to a virtual network, or VNet. You can create a VNet by going to the Azure Marketplace. Find the resource, click Create, and fill out the screens. I'll create a new resource group, give a name to my VNet, and choose a region. Next, under IP addresses, you can see that this VNet will have an IP address space 10.0/16, which means that all VMs deployed to this VNet will have 10.0 as the first 2 octets of their IP address. All VNets also must have at least one subnet. So there's one defined here called default. If you know what kind of servers you're going to deploy to a subnet, you might want to rename your subnet to be relevant for the services you'll deploy there. Next, under security, there's some interesting items here, but they can all be specified later. So let's just review and create. Azure validates my deployment. And when it's ready, we can click Create. My deployment is submitted to Azure. I'll be taken to a screen where I can wait out the deployment, or I can go and do some other work. My deployment is now complete. I can go look at my VNet. And when the portal updates, the overview blade shows me the information I specified when I created. Here's a list of subnets. There's the one that I created. So once you have a VNet set up in Azure, the next question might be, how do we connect VNets together? We're going to look at 2 ways to do that next.